The planet Kragos Prime was not a place anyone would call home. It was a death world, a harsh and unforgiving expanse of jagged mountains, dense jungles, and endless deserts. The air carried the scent of sulfur, and the skies were perpetually overcast with dark clouds that blocked out most sunlight. Strange creatures roamed the land, their glowing eyes scanning for prey in the dim light. For those who dared to set foot on this planet, survival was never guaranteed. Zorvith stepped off the transport shuttle with an air of authority. He was tall, even by alien standards, his body covered in thick, armored scales that shimmered faintly under the weak light. His sharp claws clicked against the metal ramp as he descended, and his long tail swished behind him with purpose. Zorvith had seen many battlefields and trained countless warriors across the galaxy. To him, Kragos Prime was just another challenge, albeit a particularly brutal one. He glanced at the small group of humans standing before him. They were recruits, fresh faces plucked from Earth's military academies and sent here for advanced combat training. Most of them looked nervous, shifting uneasily under the weight of their gear. A few tried to appear confident, but Zorvith could see through their masks of bravado. These humans were soft, untested. They had no idea what awaited them. Listen carefully, Zorvith growled, his voice deep and guttural. This is Kragos Prime. You will learn to fight here, or you will die. There are no second chances. His piercing yellow eyes scanned the group, lingering briefly on each face. I am your instructor. My name is Zorvath. If you survive my training, you may have a chance to return home alive. One of the recruits raised a hand hesitantly. Zorvith tilted his head slightly, acknowledging the gesture. What? The recruit swallowed hard before speaking. Sir, how many trainees usually make it through? Zorvith let out a low, rumbling chuckle. Not enough. His answer hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and ominous. The recruits exchanged uneasy glances, their initial curiosity giving way to fear. Zorvith didn't care. Fear was a good motivator. It kept soldiers alert, focused. And if they couldn't handle fear now, they wouldn't last a day on Kragos Prime. Among the recruits stood Daniel Carter, a young man with sandy brown hair and a lean build. Unlike some of the others, Daniel didn't fidget or look away when Zorvith spoke. His green eyes were steady, taking in every detail of the alien instructor and the alien world around him. Daniel wasn't new to hardship. Growing up in the remote wilderness of Earth, he had learned to fend for himself from a young age. Hunting, tracking, and surviving in the wild came naturally to him. But this was different. This wasn't just about enduring nature. It was about facing something far more dangerous. Next to Daniel stood Rachel Lane, a former track star with short blonde hair and a determined expression. She had always been competitive, driven to push her limits. Now she found herself in a situation where failure meant death. Beside her was Ethan Blake, a tech genius with glasses perched on his nose and a tablet strapped to his wrist. Ethan had spent more time coding than exercising, and his pale skin suggested he hadn't seen much sunlight recently. Still, he had volunteered for this mission, eager to prove himself. As Zorvith finished his introduction, he gestured toward the compound behind him. It was a cluster of prefabricated buildings surrounded by high walls topped with electrified fencing. Guard towers loomed at each corner, manned by armed personnel. Inside, the facilities were a mess hall, sleeping quarters, a training arena, and a medical bay. Nothing luxurious, but functional enough to keep the recruits alive if they followed the rules. Follow me, Zorvith commanded, turning sharply and striding toward the compound gates. The recruits scrambled to catch up, their boots crunching against the rocky ground. As they walked, Daniel took note of the surrounding landscape. The jungle pressed close to the compound, its twisted trees casting long shadows. Strange noises echoed in the distance, growls, screeches, and the occasional rustle of leaves. Whatever lived out there was watching them. Once inside the compound, Zorvith led the group to the training arena. It was a wide-open space filled with obstacles designed to test agility, strength, and endurance. Ropes hung from metal frames, balance beams stretched across pits of jagged rocks, and climbing walls towered overhead. At the center of the arena was a large sand pit used for sparring matches. "This is where you will begin," Zorvath said, stopping near the sandpit. "Combat is not just about strength. It is about strategy, speed, and adaptability. On Krago's prime, your enemy will not play fair, neither will I." He turned to face the recruits, his gaze sweeping over them once again. "You will start with basic drills, push-ups, sit-ups, running. Then we move to weapons training and hand-to-hand combat. By the end of the first week, you will face me in the sandpit. Consider yourselves lucky if you last 5 seconds." The recruits murmured among themselves, some groaning quietly while others squared their shoulders in determination. Daniel remained silent, his mind already working through scenarios. He knew brute strength wouldn't be enough to win against someone like Zorvath. He would need to rely on his instincts, his speed, and his ability to think quickly. The first drill began immediately. Zorvath barked orders, pushing the recruits to their limits. They dropped to the ground for push-ups, their arms trembling as they struggled to keep pace. Sweat dripped down their faces, mixing with the fine layer of dust kicked up by their movements. Rachel gritted her teeth, refusing to give up despite the burning sensation in her muscles. Ethan panted heavily, his glasses slipping down his nose as he fought to complete each rep. Daniel moved with precision, conserving his energy while maintaining perfect form. After what felt like hours, Zorvath called for a break. The recruits collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. Some grabbed water bottles from their packs, gulping greedily. Others simply lay still, staring up at the gray sky. Zorvath watched them silently, his expression unreadable. He wasn't impressed yet, but he wasn't disappointed either. Not everyone crumbled on the first day. When the break ended, Zorvath introduced them to the obstacle course. "You will run this course until you can complete it without falling. If you fall, you start over, understood?" The recruits nodded, though doubt lingered in their eyes. One by one, they approached the course, navigating the ropes, beams, and walls as best they could. Many stumbled, slipping off balance beams or losing their grip on climbing ropes. Each failure earned a sharp rebuke from Zorvath, who prowled along the sidelines like a predator stalking its prey. Daniel moved through the course with surprising ease. His years in the wilderness had taught him how to judge distances, anticipate changes in terrain, and maintain his footing. He reached the final obstacle, a towering wall with handholds carved into its surface, and scaled it effortlessly. When he jumped down on the other side, he turned to find Zorvath watching him closely. "Not bad," the alien admitted grudgingly. "But don't get cocky. Speed and agility won't save you if you can't fight." By the end of the day, the recruits were exhausted. Their bodies ached, their minds reeled, and their spirits wavered. As they trudged back to the sleeping quarters, whispers of doubt spread among them. Was this really worth it? Could they survive such intense training? Would they ever be ready to face whatever dangers lurked beyond the compound walls? Daniel listened to their murmurs but said nothing. He understood their fears. It was natural to feel overwhelmed, but he also knew that giving in to doubt would only make things worse. Instead, he focused on what he could control, his preparation, his mindset, his determination. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and he intended to meet them head-on as the lights dimmed in the sleeping quarters and the recruits drifted off to sleep. Zorvath stood outside, gazing at the stars, or rather the thick clouds that obscured them. He had trained countless warriors before, but there was something different about these humans. They were fragile, yes, but also resilient in ways he hadn't expected. Perhaps one or two of them might surprise him, little did Zorvath. No, Daniel Carter was already planning his next move. The next morning came too quickly for the recruits. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the faint glow of artificial lights from the compound illuminated their sleeping quarters. Zorvath's voice boomed through the intercom system, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Up! Everyone outside in 5 minutes." Groans filled the room as the recruits reluctantly dragged themselves out of bed. Their bodies were still sore from the previous day's training, and the thought of another grueling session made their stomachs churn. Daniel was already on his feet, stretching quietly to loosen his muscles. He knew complaining wouldn't help. Survival depended on endurance, and he wasn't about to let discomfort slow him down. Outside, the air was cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of wet earth. The recruits gathered in the training arena, their faces pale and tired. Zorveth stood at the center, his tail flicking impatiently behind him. "Today, we focus on combat," he announced. "You will learn how to fight not like amateurs throwing punches, but like soldiers who understand strategy." He gestured toward the sandpit. "Hand-to-hand combat is essential. Weapons can fail you. Ammunition runs out. Your body, however, is always with you. Learn to use it effectively." Zorveth began by demonstrating basic techniques, how to throw a punch, block an attack, and counter with precision. His movements were fluid and powerful, each strike landing with enough force to knock an opponent off balance. The recruits watched intently, trying to memorize every detail. When it was their turn to practice, they paired up, awkwardly mimicking what they had seen. Rachel struggled at first, her athletic background not translating well into combat. Her partner, Ethan, tried his best to keep up, but his lack of physical strength showed. They stumbled over each other, their attempts clumsy and ineffective. Zorveth growled in frustration, pacing back and forth as he corrected their mistakes. Daniel, on the other hand, moved with purpose. His partner was a burly recruit named Liam, who relied heavily on brute force. But Daniel didn't meet Liam's attacks head-on. Instead, he sidestepped, ducked, and used Liam's momentum against him. Within moments, Liam found himself flat on his back, staring up at the sky in disbelief. "Good," Zorveth said, pausing beside Daniel. "You have potential. But don't get complacent. There's more to learn." As the day wore on, Zorveth introduced advanced techniques, joint locks, pressure points, and disarming maneuvers. The recruits practiced tirelessly, their movements becoming slightly less awkward with each attempt. By midday, sweat soaked their uniforms, and exhaustion clouded their minds. Still, Zorveth pushed them harder, refusing to let them rest until he was satisfied. Finally, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Zorveth called for a break. The recruits collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. Rachel leaned against the wall, rubbing her sore shoulders. Ethan sat cross-legged, adjusting his glasses with trembling hands. Even Daniel looked weary, though his expression remained calm. "You've done well today," Zorveth admitted, his tone softer than usual. "But tomorrow you'll face your first real test. You'll spar with me." A collective murmur rippled through the group. Sparring with Zorveth? That sounded like a death sentence. The alien instructor noticed their unease and smirked. "Don't worry. I won't kill you unless you give me a reason to." The comment drew nervous laughter, though no one seemed particularly reassured. Daniel, however, felt a spark of excitement. This was an opportunity, a chance to prove himself. He spent the evening reviewing everything he had learned, visualizing scenarios in his mind. He knew Zorveth would be fast, strong, and relentless. But Daniel also knew that brute force alone wouldn't win the match. He needed a plan. The following morning, the recruits gathered around the sandpit once again. Zorveth stood at the center, his claws glinting in the dim light. One by one, he called them forward to spar. Rachel went first, her determination evident in her stance. She charged at Zorveth with all her strength, throwing punches and kicks with impressive speed. But Zorveth barely moved, deflecting her attacks with ease. With a single swipe of his clawed hand, he sent her sprawling to the ground. "Too predictable," he said, shaking his head. "Next," Ethan stepped up nervously, clutching his fists tightly. He hesitated, unsure where to begin. Zorveth didn't wait. In one swift motion, he closed the distance between them and tapped Ethan lightly on the chest, sending him stumbling backward. "You're thinking too much," Zorveth said. "React. Don't hesitate." Liam was next. Unlike the others, he didn't hold back. He charged at Zorveth with raw aggression, swinging wildly. For a moment, it looked like he might land a hit. But Zorveth simply sidestepped, grabbing Liam's arm and twisting it behind his back. Liam cried out in pain as Zorveth forced him to his knees. "Strength without control is useless," the alien instructor said before releasing him. Finally, it was Daniel's turn. The other recruits watched anxiously as he stepped into the sandpit. Zorvith studied him carefully, his yellow eyes narrowing. "You're different from the others," he said. "Prove it." The fight began with Zorvith launching the first attack. His claws slashed through the air, aiming for Daniel's chest. But Daniel was ready. He dropped low, dodging the blow and countering with a quick kick to Zorvath's side. The alien stumbled slightly, caught off guard by the unexpected move. "Not bad." Zorvith growled, regaining his footing. He lunged again, this time feinting left before striking right. Daniel saw through the deception, stepping aside just in time to avoid the attack. He retaliated with a series of rapid punches, targeting Zorvath's exposed ribs. Each blow landed with surprising accuracy, forcing the alien to retreat. For a brief moment, Daniel felt a surge of confidence. He was holding his own against Zorvith, something none of the other recruits had managed to do. But that confidence was short-lived. Zorvith adapted quickly, shifting his strategy. He stopped attacking directly, instead circling Daniel, waiting for an opening. When Daniel lunged forward, Zorvith seized the opportunity, grabbing him by the wrist and twisting sharply. Pain shot through Daniel's arm as he was thrown to the ground. "Good effort," Zorvith said, standing over him. "But you underestimated me. Never make that mistake." Daniel lay there for a moment, catching his breath. Despite the loss, he couldn't help but feel proud. He had pushed Zorvith farther than anyone else, and the alien instructor had acknowledged it. As he climbed to his feet, Zorvith nodded approvingly. "You've got skill, human. But skill isn't enough. You need discipline, focus, and most importantly, you need to think ahead." The rest of the week followed a similar pattern. Morning drills tested the recruits' endurance, while afternoon sessions focused on combat training. Zorvith pushed them harder each day, increasing the intensity of their workouts and introducing new challenges. The obstacle course became longer and more complex, requiring not only physical strength but also problem-solving skills. Weapons training added another layer of difficulty, as the recruits struggled to master rifles, knives, and even energy-based firearms. Through it all, Daniel continued to stand out. His natural agility and quick thinking set him apart from the others, earning him both praise and scrutiny from Zorvith. The alien instructor often singled him out during exercises, challenging him to solve puzzles or complete tasks faster than anyone else. At times it felt like Zorvith was deliberately trying to break him, but Daniel refused to give in. Every setback only fueled his determination to improve. Rachel and Ethan noticed the change in Daniel. While they were still struggling to keep up, he seemed to thrive under the pressure. "How do you do it?" Rachel asked one evening after training. "You make it look so easy." "It's not easy," Daniel replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "I just try to stay calm. If you panic, you lose focus. And if you lose focus, you make mistakes." Ethan adjusted his glasses, nodding thoughtfully. "I guess that makes sense, but I don't know if I can keep going like this. I'm exhausted." "You can," Daniel said firmly. "We all can. We just have to push through." Despite his words, Daniel knew the road ahead wouldn't be smooth. Krago's prime was unforgiving, and Zorvath's training was only the beginning. Beyond the compound walls lay dangers far greater than anything they had faced so far. Predatory creatures stalked the jungles, and hostile environments tested even the strongest warriors. Surviving here would take more than skill. It would take teamwork, adaptability, and sheer willpower. As the days passed, the recruits grew closer. Shared hardships forged bonds between them, turning strangers into allies. Rachel's competitive spirit inspired the others to push harder, while Ethan's technical knowledge proved invaluable during weapons training. Even Liam, who initially seemed more interested in showing off his strength, began contributing ideas and strategies. Together they formed a cohesive unit, supporting each other through the toughest moments. Zorvith observed these developments with interest. He had expected the humans to crumble under the weight of his training. Instead, they were growing stronger, not just individually, but as a team. It was a quality he respected, one that reminded him of his own comrades back on Xylo 7. Perhaps, he thought, these humans weren't as weak as he had assumed. By the end of the week, the recruits were battered but determined. Their bodies bore bruises and scrapes, evidence of their hard work, yet their spirits remained unbroken. They had endured Zorvath's relentless. The morning of the live mission arrived with a sense of unease hanging over the compound. Zorvath had announced the operation the night before, explaining that the recruits would be sent into the jungle to retrieve supplies from a crashed transport ship. The news had sparked a mix of excitement and dread among the group. While they were eager to put their training to use, none of them could ignore the dangers lurking in Kragos Prime's wilderness. "Listen carefully," Zorvath said as the recruits gathered in the briefing room. His voice was firm but calm, betraying no hint of concern. "The transport ship contains critical supplies, food, ammunition, medical kits. Without these, our operations here will suffer. Your task is simple: reach the crash site, secure the cargo, and return safely." He pointed to a map projected on the wall. A red dot marked the location of the ship, deep within the dense jungle. "The area is infested with predators," he continued. "Venomous creatures, ambush hunters, and environmental hazards. You must stay alert at all times. One wrong move and you'll become prey." Rachel raised her hand hesitantly. "Sir, how far is the crash site?" 10 kilometers, Zorvath replied. "You have 6 hours to complete the mission. Any longer, and we'll assume you failed or worse." The recruits exchanged uneasy glances. 10 kilometers through hostile terrain was no small feat, especially with limited time. Daniel listened quietly, his mind already analyzing the map and planning their route. He knew shortcuts wouldn't save them if they led straight into danger zones. They'd need to balance speed with caution. Zorvath handed out communication devices and instructed the team to stick together. "If anyone falls behind or gets separated, inform me immediately. Do not act recklessly." He paused, his yellow eyes scanning the group. "I'll accompany you partway to ensure you don't make fatal mistakes. After that, you're on your own." With their gear packed and weapons checked, the recruits set out under the gray skies. The jungle loomed ahead, its twisted trees casting long shadows across the ground. Strange noises echoed around them: growls, rustles, and distant screeches. Each sound sent shivers down their spines, but they pressed on, following Daniel's lead dot. As they ventured deeper into the jungle, the terrain became increasingly treacherous. Thick vines tangled their feet, forcing them to cut through with knives. Pools of stagnant water blocked their path, teeming with unseen creatures that darted beneath the surface. The air grew heavier, filled with the scent of decay and humidity. Ethan struggled to keep up, his glasses fogging constantly in the damp environment. "This place feels alive," he muttered, clutching his tablet nervously. "Like it's watching us." "It probably is," Rachel said, gripping her rifle tightly. Her sharp eyes scanned the trees for movement. She had been assigned point duty alongside Daniel, tasked with spotting threats before they struck. After 2 kilometers, the group reached a clearing where Zorvath signaled for them to stop. "From here, you're on your own," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Remember what I taught you. Stick together, stay vigilant, and trust your instincts." Before they could respond, a low growl rumbled nearby. Everyone froze, their hearts pounding as they searched for the source. Suddenly, a pack of razor-toothed predators emerged from the bush, their glowing eyes locking onto the recruits. These creatures were fast, agile, and deadly, their serrated jaws capable of tearing through flesh in seconds. "Stay calm," Daniel shouted, raising his weapon. "Form a defensive circle." The recruits obeyed, positioning themselves back to back as the predators circled them. Zorvath stood at the edge of the clearing, observing silently. This was their test, a chance to prove whether they could handle real-world threats without his guidance. One of the creatures lunged at Liam, who barely managed to raise his rifle in time. The impact knocked him off balance, and he fell to the ground with a cry of pain. Rachel fired a shot, hitting the predator squarely in the chest. It collapsed, thrashing wildly before going still. But more predators closed in, drawn by the commotion. "We can't hold them off forever," Ethan yelled, panic creeping into his voice. "There are too many." Daniel quickly assessed the situation. Fighting head-on would only exhaust their ammunition and leave them vulnerable. He spotted a narrow ravine nearby, partially hidden by thick foliage. "Follow me," he commanded, sprinting toward it. The others hesitated for a moment before following. They fired blindly behind them, keeping the predators at bay as they retreated. Reaching the ravine, Daniel gestured for everyone to climb down. The steep walls provided natural cover, shielding them from the creature's attacks. Once inside, Rachel peeked over the edge, her rifle ready. "They're still out there," she whispered. "What do we do now?" Daniel thought quickly. "We need to create a distraction, draw them away so we can escape. How?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. "We don't exactly have decoys lying around." Daniel glanced at their surroundings. Spotting a cluster of dry branches, he grabbed a few and lit them using a flare from his pack. "Fire," he explained. "These things hate fire. We'll throw the burning branches out and scatter." Without waiting for approval, he tossed the flaming sticks over the edge of the ravine. The predators shrieked in alarm, backing away from the flames. Seizing the opportunity, Daniel led the group out of the ravine and into the jungle, moving swiftly to put distance between them and the predators. For the next hour, they pushed forward, adrenaline fueling their movements. Though shaken, the recruits worked together seamlessly, covering each other's backs and sharing resources. When one stumbled, another helped them up. When someone faltered, encouragement kept them going. Eventually, they reached the crash site. The transport ship lay in pieces, its metal frame twisted and scorched. Smoke still rose from the wreckage, mingling with the humid air. Daniel signaled for the team to spread out and search for the supplies. They worked efficiently, loading crates onto makeshift stretchers crafted from fallen branches and rope. Just as they finished gathering the cargo, a loud roar echoed through the jungle. The ground trembled slightly, sending waves of fear through. The group, "What was that?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible. "I don't know," Daniel replied, his expression grim. "But we need to move, now." They began retracing their steps, hauling the supplies with them. The roar came again, closer this time. Through the trees, they caught glimpses of something massive moving in their direction. Whatever it was big and angry. Panic threatened to take hold, but Daniel kept his composure. "Stay focused," he urged. "Stick to the plan. We've made it this far, we're not giving up now." Rachel nodded, taking charge of the rear guard. She fired warning shots whenever the creature drew too close, buying the team precious seconds. Ethan used his tablet to track their progress, ensuring they stayed on course despite the chaos. Liam, though injured, refused to slow them down, shouldering part of the load despite the pain. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they emerged from the jungle and staggered back into the compound. Zorveth was waiting for them, his arms crossed as he watched them approach. The recruits collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air and covered in dirt and sweat. "Well done," Zorveth said, his tone grudgingly approving. "You faced fear and survived. That's more than most trainees achieve." Daniel looked up at the alien instructor, his chest heaving. "We couldn't have done it without teamwork." Zorveth studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, teamwork and leadership. You stepped up when it mattered, human. Don't forget that." That night, as the recruits rested in their quarters, they reflected on the day's events. They had faced death and triumphed, proving to themselves and Zorveth that they were capable of handling the challenges of Kregos Prime. For Daniel, the experience reinforced his belief in preparation and strategy. For Rachel and Ethan, it highlighted the importance of trust and collaboration. Outside, Zorveth stood alone, gazing at the stars, or rather, the clouds obscuring them. He had underestimated these humans once again. Their ingenuity, resilience, and ability to adapt had impressed him. Perhaps, he thought, they weren't so different from Zylosian warriors after all, unbeknownst to everyone. However, a larger threat loomed on the horizon. Something far more dangerous than predators or environmental hazards. And when it arrived, it would test not only their skills, but also their unity and resolve. The tension between Daniel and Zorveth grew thicker with each passing day. The alien instructor had always prided himself on being unbeatable, but his loss to Daniel during the sparring match gnawed at him. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially by a human. For Daniel, the victory was bittersweet. While it boosted his confidence, it also made him wary. He knew Zorvath wouldn't let the defeat go unanswered. One morning, Zorvath called the recruits to the training arena. His voice carried an edge that sent shivers down their spines. "Today," he announced, "we settle this. Another match, just me and Daniel, no distractions." The other recruits exchanged nervous glances. They had seen Zorvath's skills firsthand and knew how dangerous he could be. Rachel leaned close to Ethan. "Do you think Daniel can win again?" she whispered. Ethan adjusted his glasses, frowning. "I don't know. Zorvath looks different today." Daniel stepped into the sandpit without hesitation. His expression was calm, but his mind raced. He replayed their previous fight in his head, analyzing every move. Zorvath was fast and strong, but Daniel had learned something crucial. He relied too much on power. If Daniel could outsmart him again, he might stand a chance. Zorvath circled him, his claws glinting under the dim light. "Last time you got lucky," he growled. "This time I won't hold back." The fight began with Zorvath launching a flurry of attacks. His claws slashed through the air, forcing Daniel to dodge and weave. The alien's movements were faster this time, more precise. But Daniel stayed patient, waiting for an opening. When Zorvath lunged forward, Daniel sidestepped and countered with a sharp elbow strike to the ribs. Zorvath grunted but didn't falter. The battle intensified. Zorvath adapted quickly, mixing feints with powerful blows. Daniel struggled to keep up, his energy draining rapidly. Just as it seemed like Zorvath would overpower him, Daniel spotted a weakness. The alien's tail, a part of his body he rarely used in combat, was exposed. With one swift motion, Daniel dropped low and grabbed the tail, yanking it hard. Zorvath stumbled, caught off balance. Seizing the opportunity, Daniel delivered a spinning kick to the side of Zorvath's head. The alien hit the ground with a thud. Stunned. Silence fell over the arena. The recruits stared in disbelief. Zorvath lay there for a moment before slowly climbing to his feet. His yellow eyes locked onto Daniel's, filled not with anger, but with respect. "You've earned my respect, human," Zorvath said, his voice steady. "You're no ordinary soldier." Daniel nodded, catching his breath. "Thank you, but we're not done yet. There's still more to learn." From that day on, the dynamic between them shifted. Zorvath began working alongside Daniel, combining Xylosian techniques with human ingenuity. Together, they refined the training program, preparing the recruits for whatever dangers lay ahead. Little did they know, those dangers were closer than anyone realized. The peace at the compound didn't last long. One evening, as the recruits were resting after a long day of training, alarms blared across the base. Red lights flashed and panicked voices crackled over the intercom system. "Intruder alert! Hostile swarm approaching from the north." Zorvath burst into the sleeping quarters, his tail whipping behind him. "Move! Everyone to the armory!" he barked. The recruits scrambled to their feet, grabbing weapons and strapping on gear. Outside, the ground shook as a massive swarm of insectoid creatures descended upon the compound. Their armored bodies glinted under the dim light, and their razor-sharp mandibles snapped hungrily. Daniel took charge, rallying the team. "Stick together! We've trained for this!" Rachel and Ethan nodded, their faces pale but determined. Even Liam, still nursing his injuries, stepped up without hesitation. Zorvath led the defense, positioning the recruits strategically around the perimeter. "Aim for their weak spots, the joints in their exoskeletons," he instructed. "And, don't let them surround you." The battle was chaotic. The insectoids surged forward in waves, their numbers overwhelming. Rachel fired her rifle with precision, taking down one creature after another. Ethan used his tablet to identify patterns in the swarm's movements, guiding the team to safer positions. Liam wielded a heavy energy weapon, blasting through clusters of enemies despite the pain in his leg, but it was Daniel who truly shone. Using the skills he'd honed during training, he darted between the creatures, striking with quick, calculated blows. When one insectoid lunged at him, he sidestepped and drove his blade into its exposed underside. His movements were fluid, almost like a dance, and the recruits followed his lead. As the fight dragged on, the tide began to turn. Zorveth noticed how seamlessly the humans worked together, combining their strengths to overcome the swarm. He felt a surge of pride, not just for Daniel, but for all of them. These recruits had transformed from frightened newcomers into capable warriors. Finally, after what felt like hours, the swarm retreated, leaving behind a battlefield littered with their fallen. The compound was damaged, but it still stood. The recruits collapsed onto the ground, exhausted but victorious. Zorveth approached Daniel, his expression unreadable. "You've proven yourself," he said quietly. "Your skills rival even the best Xylosian warriors." Daniel shook his head. "It wasn't just me. We did this together." Zorveth nodded, then extended an invitation. "Join the Xylosian elite forces. Fight alongside us." Though honored, Daniel declined. "My place is here with my people, but I'll take what I've learned and share it." As Zorveth prepared to leave Kregos Prime, he reflected on the lessons he'd learned from the humans. They were resilient, resourceful, and willing to adapt, qualities that made them formidable allies. For the first time, he saw them not as inferior beings, but as equals. The recruits watched Zorvath's ship disappear into the sky, knowing they had earned his respect. Under Daniel's leadership, they rebuilt the compound and continued training, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they had faced death and emerged stronger, a testament to the power of teamwork, courage, and determination.